Listen, there's something absolutely mind-blowing about how we create the world we live in. Every single day we walk around carrying these massive assumptions, these unshakable beliefs about how reality works that feel so damn obvious we never stop to question them. But here's the twist. When you finally wake up, when you actually pierce through the fog of everything you've been taught to believe, these rock-solid assumptions crumble like sandcastles. They're not exactly lies, but they're constructions, clever tricks your mind plays that you've mistaken for ultimate truth. Right now, I'm going to reveal 8 of these tricks, 8 massive misconceptions that vanish the moment awareness turns its gaze upon itself. Notice I said vanish, not explode or shatter, because that's what genuinely happens. They don't collapse in some dramatic explosion. They quietly evaporate like fog when sunlight hits it, exposing what was hiding underneath all along. Let's dive into the biggest trick of them all, the foundation supporting every other illusion. This is the mind-bending idea that you're separate from everything around you, that there's you trapped inside here and the universe sprawling out there, and between these two exists some real barrier, some actual division. Intellectually, sure, most people grasp this isn't totally accurate. We understand ecology, interconnection, how everything touches everything else. We know the oxygen filling your lungs came from trees. We know the atoms forming your body were cooked inside dying stars. We can grasp interdependence as a concept, but understanding it in your head is wildly different from seeing through the illusion completely. Because awakening doesn't just show you that everything connects, it reveals that the division itself is fake. There's no separate you that connects to everything else. Connection isn't some relationship between two different things. It's actually identity. You are the entire process temporarily viewing itself from this particular angle. Consider this carefully. Your body doesn't actually end at your skin. Right this second, you're swapping molecules with the air surrounding you with every single breath. Yesterday's lunch is literally transforming into you today. The line between inside and outside is totally made up. We draw it at the skin because it's convenient, but we could just as easily draw it at the solar system's edge. After all, without the sun blazing away, you wouldn't exist whatsoever. When this separation trick dissolves, you don't suddenly gain some mystical superpower. Instead, you lose an ancient illusion. You realize what you believed was an isolated thing has always been a wave rolling through an ocean, a note singing in a symphony, a word breathing in a story. The wave was never actually separate from the ocean. How could it possibly be? It's made entirely of ocean. It moves as ocean moves. It is ocean temporarily showing up in this specific shape. And when you see this, truly see it not as some abstract idea, but as direct knowing, your entire relationship with existence transforms. You're no longer protecting a tiny fortress against a hostile universe. You're the universe experiencing itself from this specific viewpoint. The gap between self and other starts blurring, not because you've reached some elevated dimension, but because you've stopped buying into a division that never truly existed. The second trick flows naturally from the first. If you think you're separate, then obviously you think you have control, that you're writing your own story, commanding your destiny. This is what we label free will, and it's one of the most convincing tricks we perpetually maintain. Now, before you argue back, I'm not pushing pure determinism. That would just swap one trick for another. What I'm pointing toward is more delicate. The real question isn't whether your choices are free or determined. The question is who's actually doing the choosing. Watch your mind right now. Where do your thoughts spring from? Did you consciously decide what thought to think next, or did it just pop up? You might argue, well, I chose to listen to you, so I must control something. But did you decide to decide? Where did that decision originate? If you trace it backward far enough, you discover that decisions emerge from conditions you never chose. Your genes, your childhood, your circumstances, your brain chemistry in this exact moment. The awakened person sees that what we call me isn't the controller, but the process itself unfolding. You're not inside your body like a driver sits inside a car. You are what your body is actively doing. The feeling of being a separate controller, some ego perched behind your eyeballs pulling levers, is a construction. A useful story that evolution created, because creatures believing they're in control fight harder to survive. But here's the paradox that'll blow your mind. When the control trick dissolves, you don't become some passive zombie. You don't stop making choices. You don't stop taking action. What shifts is the crushing weight, the burden of being responsible for authoring absolutely everything. Things still unfold. Choices still get made. But there's no longer this separate you hauling the entire cosmos on your back. It's like this. Picture yourself watching a river flow past. The river doesn't need to control its flowing. It doesn't stress about whether it's flowing properly. It simply flows according to its nature and whatever conditions it meets. When the control trick drops away, you realize you're exactly like that. You're not controlling your life. You are your life, unfolding according to its nature. And strangely, when you stop trying to control every single thing, when you stop forcing and pushing and manipulating, things often flow more smoothly, not because you've gained some magical ability, but because you've stopped interfering with the natural intelligence of existence itself. Now we arrive at one of the most widespread tricks, the notion that time is some line stretching from past through present into future, and that we're moving along this line toward something better, toward completion, toward finally arriving. This is the trick keeping you forever unsatisfied with this present moment. You're always preparing, always working toward, always becoming. I'll feel happy when I land the job, when I discover the relationship, when I accomplish the goal. But naturally, when you reach any specific point, the present moment is still sitting here. And if you're not comfortable in the present moment, you won't be comfortable anywhere ever. The awakened person sees that time isn't a line, but a dimension of the eternal now. Yes, there are sequences, events, following each other, but these are all happening within this present moment. The past exists only as memory, which is a present experience. The future exists only as anticipation or imagination, which is also a present experience. The only thing that's ever actually here is now. This doesn't mean you don't plan ahead or remember yesterday. It means you recognize that planning and remembering are things you're doing now. You're not really traveling anywhere. You're always here. And here is always now. There's nowhere else to exist and no other time to exist in. When this trick drops, you stop delaying your life. You stop waiting for perfect conditions, the perfect moment, the perfect circumstances. You recognize that this is it. This moment exactly as it appears. The only moment you'll ever possess. Not in some tragic, depressing sense, but in an incredibly liberating sense. You're already at the destination. You've always been at the destination. There's nowhere else to arrive at. And this is when life becomes vivid, immediate, overflowing. Because you're no longer half present, with one foot stuck in the past regretting, or one foot stuck in the future worrying. You are completely here, completely alive, completely engaged with what exists right now. The fourth trick is perhaps the most agonizing one. The trick that things should be different than they are. This is the basic posture of resistance, of fighting with reality, of insisting that what's happening shouldn't be happening. Now, I'm not talking about being passive or resigned. I'm talking about something far more subtle. There's a huge difference between accepting what is and not taking action to transform things. You can fully accept that it's pouring rain while simultaneously deciding to construct shelter. The acceptance is of the fact not of remaining forever soaked in the rain. But most people don't operate this way. They burn enormous amounts of energy resisting what already exists. This shouldn't have happened. I shouldn't feel this way. They shouldn't have done that. The world shouldn't be like this. And all this resistance creates suffering because you're attempting to battle with something that's already occurred, that's already present. When you wake up, you see how pointless this is. You realize that reality is always exactly as it is, and it couldn't be otherwise in this moment given all the conditions that created it. This doesn't mean you enjoy everything. It doesn't mean you don't work to change things. It means you start from acceptance of what is, rather than from resistance. It's like this. Imagine you're swimming in a river, and you encounter a massive, You can spend your energy being furious that the rock is there, demanding that it shouldn't be there, battling against its existence, or you can acknowledge that it is there and swim around it. Same action, completely different relationship to reality. The awakened person swims around the rock. They don't waste energy fighting with facts. They see what exists, they accept what exists, and they respond appropriately. And in this, there's tremendous freedom because you're no longer exhausting yourself in pointless battles with reality itself. The fifth trick is that you are your thoughts. This is a sneaky one because it's so deeply woven into our sense of identity. We think we are the thinker, that the voice chattering in our head is us, that our thoughts define who we are. But if you observe carefully, you'll notice something strange. Thoughts appear in your awareness. You don't create them through some act of will. They arise, they exist for a moment, and they disappear. If you were your thoughts, who is it that's noticing them? Who is watching the thinking happen? The awakened person recognizes that they are not their thoughts, but the space in which thoughts arise. You're the awareness, the consciousness, the open presence within which thinking occurs. Thoughts are like clouds drifting through the sky. The sky doesn't become the clouds. It simply allows them to drift through. When you see this, you gain enormous freedom. You're no longer bullied by your thinking. You don't have to believe every thought that pops up. You don't have to take your mental commentary as gospel truth. You can watch thoughts arising, notice them, and let them pass without getting tangled up in them. This doesn't mean thinking stops happening. It means thinking is recognized for what it actually is. A tool, a process, something that happens, not something that you are. And when you're not fused with your thoughts, you can use thinking when it's helpful and rest from it when it's not. You're no longer compulsively thinking, trying to figure out absolutely everything, trying to mentally control your experience. The sixth trick is that happiness comes from outside circumstances. We all know this in our heads, but we don't live like we know it. We still believe that if we just get the right career, the right partner, the right amount of money, the right living situation, then we'll be happy. We're forever chasing conditions, thinking that happiness is somewhere out there waiting for us to arrange things correctly. But when awakening happens, you realize that happiness isn't a feeling that comes from circumstances. It's your natural state. When you're not resisting what is, it's what's here. When you stop fighting with reality, when you stop insisting that things should be different, when you stop delaying your fulfillment. Think about it carefully. When have you been genuinely happy? Not excited, not entertained, but deeply at peace. It's usually been in moments when you weren't wanting anything else. Maybe you were watching a sunset, or playing with a child, or completely absorbed in some activity. In those moments, the wanting mind was silent. You were simply present, simply here. And that presence itself was fulfilling. This is your natural state. Happiness isn't something you achieve or acquire. It's what remains when you stop disturbing yourself with craving and aversion, with wanting things to be different than they are. It's always been here, underneath all the agitation, all the seeking, all the struggle. When you see this, you stop making happiness conditional. You stop saying, "I'll be happy when." You recognize that you can be at peace now, regardless of circumstances. Not because you've achieved some superhuman state, but because you've stopped doing the thing that was preventing peace. You've stopped fighting with what is. The seventh trick is that you know what things mean. We're constantly interpreting, constantly assigning meaning to events, constantly telling ourselves stories about what's happening and why it's happening. And we take these interpretations to be truth. We don't realize we're making it all up. Something happens and immediately the mind says this is good or this is bad. Someone treats you a certain way and the mind says this means they don't like me or this means I'm not good enough. You fail at something and the mind screams, this means I'm a failure. These interpretations seem like simple observations of fact, but they're not. They're stories, meanings you're imposing on events that are in themselves meaningless. When you awaken, you see that life doesn't come with built-in meaning. You're the one creating it, then forgetting you did, and treating it as truth. A rainy day isn't bad. That's your story. Losing a job isn't a disaster. That's your interpretation. Someone's behavior doesn't define you. That's your projection. This isn't saying nothing matters. It means once you see that meaning is created, not discovered, you're free to create wiser meanings, to tell stories that serve you instead of imprison you. And sometimes the most freeing act is to simply not know what things mean, to let them be as they are. This not knowing isn't ignorance, it's wisdom. The recognition that reality is always richer and more mysterious than any story you tell about it. The final trick is that enlightenment is something special reserved for special people, some extraordinary event that turns you into someone else. But awakening isn't an achievement. It's a recognition. You're not becoming something new. You're realizing what you've always been, already awake, already whole. The very search for enlightenment is what hides it, like a wave searching for the ocean, never realizing it is the ocean. When this trick dissolves, the search ends not because you found something, but because you see you were never lost. The journey was imaginary. The destination was always under your feet. Enlightenment isn't extraordinary. It's utterly ordinary. It's the falling away of the belief in separation, the end of the idea that you are something apart, seeking what you lack. What remains is simple, immediate, obvious. You are this moment, this awareness. You might say, but I don't feel enlightened. Of course not. These tricks are deeply conditioned. They've been reinforced your entire life. Yet when you see through even one trick, it begins to weaken the others, because they depend on each other. The trick of separation supports the trick of control, which supports the trick of time, and so on. You don't need to dismantle them all. Just see one clearly and the rest begin to fade. This isn't about becoming someone new, but about seeing through who you thought you were. Enlightenment isn't an addition, it's a subtraction. You're not gaining something. You're losing illusion. What remains is what was always here, the undeniable presence that you are and always have been. The Buddha called it awakening. Jesus called it being born again. The Taoists called it returning to the source. All words pointing to the same thing, the recognition of reality that was always here. And you don't need to believe this. You can see for yourself. Look at your own experience. Question what you take for granted. Observe whether happiness truly comes from circumstances or from your relationship with them. Notice whether you're your thoughts or the awareness behind them. Awakening isn't escape from life, but fuller participation in it. Not transcendence, but acceptance. Not becoming something else, but realizing what you already are. It's available now, not as a future goal, but as present recognition. These tricks can be seen through now if you're willing to look. When you do, you find what you were seeking has always been here. The 8 tricks aren't enemies. They're misunderstandings. They dissolve not through struggle, but through seeing. So look, question, investigate, not to believe, but to see. For truth can't be given, only discovered. And when you see it, you realize you were never the limited self you imagined, but the entire process, the whole dance, the infinite expressing itself as you. That recognition is freedom, the gift of awakening. Not a destination, but a homecoming. Not an achievement, but a remembering of what you've always been.